The sky bled orange over the high mesa, a burn of light fading into cold blue. Wind cut sharp across the ridge road. Dust rode dry and bitter. Elias Boone leaned low in the saddle, reins slack, horse breathing heavy. Hoofbeats echoed against stone, steady as a ticking clock. He listened to the rhythm. One rider. One road, a flicker at the tree line. A shadow where no shadow should be. Elias slowed. The horse snorted, ears pricking. From the mesquite brush, a figure lurched. Small, barefoot, hair tangled black against the dying sun. She stumbled forward, eyes wide but distant. Her breath rasped like torn cloth. Elias held still. The wind carried a faint creak from the ranch shutters miles back, a ghost sound. The girl swayed. Cracked lips parted. A whisper scraped out, thin as wind through dry grass. Other men. Left me, nothing else. No name, no scream. Just the words breaking in the air. Her knees buckled. Elias swung from the saddle in one practiced motion. Boots hit dust. He crouched beside her, shadow stretching long across the road. The horse shifted, leather creaking, hoof striking stone. Elias pressed 2 fingers to her throat. A pulse. Weak but there. The evening fell quieter than it should. No birds. Only the steady rasp of her breath and the distant lonely hinge of a shutter swinging back at the ranch. He slid his arms beneath her weight, lifted her as if she were a memory he'd been expecting. No words. No questions. Just action. Dust followed as he turned toward home, the sun bleeding its last light across the mesa. Lantern light waits in the silent house. Lamplight flickered against weathered pine, throwing restless shadows across the Boone ranch house. Bitter coffee scented the air, sharp and warm against the cold night seeping through the chinks. The girl stirred on the worn settee, eyes fluttering open to the crackle of the stove fire. She jolted at a sudden creak from the porch boards. Her breath caught. Fingers clutched the frayed quilt like a shield. Elias Boone sat by the hearth, chair angled to the door. A chipped enamel mug steamed beside him. He broke a slice of dry bread and set it on the table between them. No words. Just the offer. The girl's gaze darted to the door, to the windows where frost etched pale lines. Outside a coyote cried, long, mournful. The sound carried through the thin boards, echoing like memory. Another creak. Slow. Weight shifting on the porch. Elias didn't move. Only his eyes slid to the shotgun across his lap. His thumb brushed the worn steel, checking the latch by feel. The girl flinched at the pop of a fire log. Her lips trembled. A whisper escaped, softer than before. They took everything. And left me, the words settled like dust in the lamplight. Elias met her gaze, unreadable. He said nothing. The chair gave a low groan as he leaned forward, ears tuned to the night. Through the side window, a single lantern swayed in the barn, a lonely light bobbing in the wind. Watching. Waiting. No words. No questions. Just the slow breath of 2 souls holding a quiet line against the dark. Stars sharpen outside as a memory stirs on the porch. Night settled heavy, a velvet black stitched with hard white stars. The ranch house exhaled a slow warmth behind him. Inside, the girl finally slept, her breathing a faint rhythm under the crackle of dying coals. Elias Boone stepped onto the porch, boots whispering against dry boards. Cold bit through his coat, carrying the scent of mesquite from somewhere beyond the tree line. He gripped the railing, knuckles pale in starlight. Memory rose with the wind, smoke curling over a burned-out cavalry post, the copper sting of spent powder. A child's cry swallowed by fire. Another Apache girl he hadn't reached in time. The old wound throbbed in his left shoulder, a dull ache where lead still lived. He rolled it once, slow, but the pain stayed. A hoofbeat drifted from the dark canyon. Faint. Far. The same cadence he'd heard that night years ago. One rider, deliberate. He held his breath until silence swallowed the sound, leaving only the scrape of cedar branches. Behind him the girl murmured in sleep, a single name he didn't know. The syllables bled through the thin wool, soft as a prayer. He closed his eyes. Past and present blurred. The burned post, the ridge road, this quiet house holding a stranger. Patterns repeated. The wind shifted. Mesquite smoke sharpened, nearer now. Someone camping too close. Someone patient. Elias loosened the strap on the shotgun leaning by the door. No words, no questions. Just the cold certainty that trouble was already riding. Hoofbeats will return with the first gray light. Morning came thin and sharp, sunlight bleeding slow across the mesa. The Boone ranch lay quiet, except for the soft hiss of wind through cedar. Then hoofbeats. 3 sets, hard and sure. Elias Boone rose from the table, chair legs scraping wood. The girl froze near the window, shawl clutched tight. Outside, 3 riders climbed the ridge road, silhouettes cut against the pale sky. Dust followed like a warning. The lead man wore a black bowler and a grin too slick for morning. Sloan, banker's hired mouth. His coat carried town polish, but the eyes beneath the brim were snake dark. They reined up at the gate. Sloan tipped his hat toward the window, gaze sliding to the girl with a curl of lip that wasn't a smile. "Property dispute," he called, voice lazy. "Paperwork says she owes a debt. Father left more than land behind." His tone tasted of ownership. Elias stepped onto the porch, shotgun resting across his lap. He said nothing. Only the wooden creak of the step answered. Sloan's grin widened. "Fine spread you keep, Boone. Shame to see it tangled in someone else's trouble." The girl shrank back from the window, breath sharp against glass. Dust swirled around the rider's boots. Sloan leaned in the saddle, lowering his voice so only Elias heard. "Sunset's quick out here. I'll be back before you notice the dark." He turned his horse with a flick of reins. The others followed, spurs flashing in the light. Elias tightened his grip on the porch rail. No words, no questions, just the sound of fading hoofbeats and the girl's silent trembling behind the door. The ridge waits for a secret ride through canyon shadows. Night draped the mesa in deep blue. Elias Boone swung onto his horse, reins stiff in cold hands. The ranch disappeared behind him, silent except for the occasional groan of a shudder. Hoofbeats thumped against hard-packed earth as he descended into the canyon, shadows long and sharp. The telegraph station crouched against the rocks, wires humming in the chill. Inside, Maribel adjusted her lantern, smoke curling from a small stove. She didn't speak, just watched Elias slide a hand across the keys, tapping a coded rhythm. "Need watch on Banker Sloan, child in danger," he whispered. Each letter measured, precise. Maribel's eyes narrowed. "Half the law answers to him, Boone. You know that." He gave a curt nod. No words. Just the hum of wires carrying his plea across miles of desert and canyon. She slid a tin of rifle cartridges across the counter. Brass caught the lamplight, a small promise. Elias took them, fingers brushing cold metal, heart steady, nerves tight. Back at the ranch, the girl waited by the porch, shawl pulled close. Her eyes swept the tree line, alert, unblinking. Each whisper of wind set her to shiver. A lone owl called from the distant ridge, voice sharp and patient. Elias returned, mounting quietly. The firelight cast long shadows across the porch, dancing over her face, revealing a flicker of hope tangled with fear. The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of mesquite smoke and the faint metallic tang of cartridges in his pack. Elias gripped the reins, feeling the storm gather in invisible folds across ridge and canyon alike. No words, no questions. Just readiness. Hoofbeats will announce the banker's return before dawn breaks the ridge. Dawn broke thin over the ridge, a pale smear across the desert. 5 riders crested the hill, dust trailing like smoke behind them. Sloan led, black bowler tipped low, eyes gleaming sharp and cold. Like a rattler coiled for strike. "Hand her over," he called, voice flat, venom in every syllable. Elias Boone stepped onto the ridge road, rifle braced across his chest. Wind whipped the dust into arcs around his boots, carrying the dry taste of mesquite and powder. Words fell silent. Only the horses' hooves drummed the tense morning. Then, action. Horses thundered closer. Sloan's gang fanned, spurs flashing, leather creaking. Elias fired warning shots, bullets tearing through fence posts, wood splintering like brittle bone. Dust rose in choking clouds. The girl ducked behind the porch pillar, fists clenched, eyes wide but steady. Each breath caught in the cold air, heart drumming against ribs. Sloan drew steel, the glint catching the first sunlight. A flash. Elias dropped to one knee, rifle shaking, bullet grazing the brim of his hat. Smoke and gunpowder tangled, sharp and biting, the air thick with threat. The stallion of the marshal appeared over the far hill, whistle slicing the chaos. Reinforcements thumped down the ridge road, galloping into the fray. Sloane cursed, teeth flashing. His gang pulled back, spurs clattering against flanks. In a blink, he vanished into the canyon's mouth, dust swallowing him whole. His eyes never left theirs, dark promise etched in every line of his face. The girl exhaled a trembling laugh. Elias rose, rifle still steady, shoulder aching but firm. Dust settled around broken fence posts, hoofprints, and the faint curl of mesquite smoke. No words, no questions, just the heavy, sharp certainty that the fight was only beginning. The ranch waits quiet, but shadows whisper of Sloane's inevitable return. The ranch lay quiet, almost too quiet. Birds began to return to the cedar grove, their soft calls stitching the stillness together. Dust settled on splintered fence posts and hoofprints, and the smell of mesquite smoke lingered faint in the cool air. Elias Boone sat at the table, sleeves rolled, bandaging a shallow graze along his forearm. The wound was minor, but the sting reminded him the ridge road never forgot. He worked silently, eyes flicking toward the girl. She moved by the stove, hands trembling as she poured bitter coffee into chipped enamel mugs. Steam curled upward, filling the room with a sharp, warm scent. She shivered, then swallowed, forcing her voice past fear. "My name?" "Nayeli," she said, voice soft at first, then steadier. Her dark eyes met his, carrying the weight of a family's loss. She told him of Sloane's men, of deeds done while the town slept. Land stolen, home taken. No mercy shown, Elias listened. His expression never changed, stoic as always, but his hand rested on the table where hers hovered in the lamplight. Protective, patient, a promise without words, no words. No questions, just action waiting. Outside, a hawk drifted across the ridge, circling in the rising sun. Dust swirled lightly, carried by wind that whispered of distant threats yet to come. Inside, coffee steamed, and two hearts measured the quiet after the storm. Even in stillness, the ridge holds a storm ready to ride again. Evening draped soft over the ridge, gold bleeding into shadow. Elias Boone stood on the porch, shotgun resting across the rail, worn wood beneath calloused hands. Nayeli leaned beside him, shawl pulled close, eyes tracing the far canyon where Sloane had vanished, dust still curling from his retreat. The marshal's voice carried from the ridge, low and firm. Patrols would ride, he promised, but a warning lingered. Sloane always returned. Elias exhaled slow, letting the wind carry away tension. Finally he spoke, voice rough but steady. "Storm's not over, but you're safe tonight." Nayeli nodded, shoulders easing. Her gaze stayed fixed on the canyon, the place where threat had bled into their world. Silence held, measured and patient. The sun sank, painting the ridge in orange and violet, shadows stretching long over the mesa. Two silhouettes stood framed by fading light, the world quiet but heavy with possibility. The ridge whispered of choices, of paths carved by action and inaction. In a land where men take and leave, who do you choose to be? If you're still here listening, subscribe to hear the next ride. Shadows stretch long as a new threat stirs beyond the canyon.